Okay. Up next is a brief summary of current events by the mayor, city council, and/or city manager, and the public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take any legal action on any matter brought up during this summary unless the specific matter is properly noticed for legal action. Do we have any council members tonight? Please.
Just real quick, I went to the Mingus Mountain Republican Luncheon last week, and Tom Thurman was our speaker. He did a great job. He just kind of brought us up to date on a few things. One of the kudos was YAVAPAI County is listed as #1 in fiscal responsibility among the 19 Arizona counties, which I thought that was very sweet. Highway 260, which our guest here, where'd he go, is on schedule as they're working on it. Everybody knows, you drive down there, you know it's on schedule, so they're doing everything they're supposed to. He did comment that our governor, which had a marvelous State of the State address, wants to know where that money's going to come from, because often when they say that marvelous projects that are coming up, the funding comes from the counties and the cities. So he did say just keep your eyes open for that. Otherwise, it was a great meeting.
Good, thanks. Any other council members have anything to report? No? Okay. City manager?
Mayor, council members, and to the public, just a reminder and an invitation that the Riverfront Water Reclamation Facility open house and tour will be on Wednesday, January 24th at 2 p.m. And again, the public's invited to that if they want to come out and see what that's all about. And also just a nice event coming up. Our Cottonwood Youth Advisory Commission is setting up a Valentine's Day dance at Cottonwood Village. So nice little bit for the Youth Commission. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, up next on the agenda is presentations. We just have one presentation tonight by Chairwoman Wieniecki and Mayor Doug von Gossig. If you would both please stand up. And it's important that we get you both to speak into the mic, otherwise we can't pick it up. But thanks both of you for being here, and the presentation is on the proposed Big Chino Reservoir Power Project.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I appreciate you having the opportunity to come here and talk to you about this. This isn't anything that directly is going to affect municipalities in the Verde Valley, except that it will affect the Verde River if it comes to fruition up there. So first, briefly, a pump storage project is a project of generating electricity that is based primarily on the fact that it's cheaper to buy electricity at night than it is during the day. So that's the whole basis for this kind of a project. And it consists of 2 reservoirs, one high and one low, several hundred feet below the top one. During the day, the water from the top one runs down through penstocks, generates electricity just like it does in a hydroelectric dam, and ends up in the lower reservoir. And at night, when electricity is very inexpensive on the grid, because there's not as much demand for it, that water is pumped back up to the upper reservoir. So all day long, all year long, that's all that happens in this project. Water comes from here to there, and then it's pumped back. And in the meantime, some money is made by the differential in the 2 rates. This is important for us because where these pump storage lakes are proposed is up in the Big Chino aquifer, which is the aquifer that supplies the headwaters for the Verde River. About 85% or so of the water in the headwaters of the Verde come from that same aquifer. And USGS has said for many, many years that any water that is consumed out of the Big Chino aquifer is water that will not discharge into the Verde River on a 1-to-1 basis. So these 2 lakes that are being considered up in the Big Chino are a total of about 300 acres surface area of water. They are going to require a tremendous amount of water just to fill, but that should be a one-time thing, right? Not that big a concern for us. The real problem is the fact that every day water evaporates from these ponds. And in my estimation, and the numbers haven't been figured out yet officially, but in my estimation, that's going to amount to about 1,000 acre-feet of water per year. 1,000 acre-feet of water is about 2% of what the Verde's flowing. Right now, it's about 3 or 4% of what it's flowing in the depths of the summer around here. So it's a significant amount, especially if you're in a kayak who barely misses all the rocks anyway. So this will also affect the first 24 miles of the river pretty severely. This is the second time we've heard about this project. The first time was 5 years ago. Tom, you remember when it was about that, right? About 5 years ago, they started the same kind of a project, and some of the same people are involved today as were involved back then. It didn't really come to fruition back then because of a number of things, chief amongst which is you have to run this 22 gigawatts of electricity that they're going to be making, which is a very large power plant, is now going to have to be run and connected to the grid, and there are no grid lines anywhere near the project. So this is a very expensive thing. It's a line siting concern. It's a concern of getting right-of-way to place all those lines. It's all the environmentals that have to be done and everything else. But they feel this time like they've probably got the money and the backing to do the project. The project is currently before FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And FERC has to approve these kinds of large projects. It also has to kind of approve how that project is going to transmit its electricity to the grid and where it's going to hook up with the grid and all of those kinds of things. FERC let everybody know mid last year and placed a date sometime in December, early December or the end of November, one of the two, for people that wanted to intervene in the case. And if you intervene, you're then noticed on everything that's happening, and you can make comments on each part of the application process as it proceeds. Clarkdale has intervened in the case, and as has the City of Prescott, SRP, the YAVAPAI-APACHE Nation, and several others, Freeport, McMoran, I think Bureau of Reclamation, is that right? Has also intervened in there, and that means that we'll be able to comment on it and let them know what our particular concerns are as far as how they might be able to proceed and not harm the Verde River. So Clarkdale has taken a position that a large part of the economic development opportunities that arise in the Verde Valley arise because of the health of the Verde River, and that we don't want to see that hurt. We haven't really talked about all the other environmental concerns that you might have about this project being in the prairie or the pronghorns or any of that, because we didn't think that it was really germane to what we were doing here. But we now have intervened. And I'm going to be keeping the mayor up on whatever we hear and decide as this project goes on, because the mayor has formed a really wonderful committee of mayors from around the Verde Valley to talk about water issues. We meet every month or so to talk about those things, so I'll keep Mayor Alinsky informed about that. But I wanted you guys all to know about it just so you'd have it on the top of your head when you heard something about a pump storage project and how that might affect the Verde, because it isn't intuitive that something that's going to be 40 miles away is really going to have much impact on us, but this one could, and it's worth paying attention to. And if it becomes expensive for the town of Clarkdale to continue to intervene, you know, we would help, we'd welcome Steve's assistance in any of that, or any other assistance or comments that you might have. So if you think of something after you've read the material that I've provided for you and you'd like that answered, you can channel that through us and we can do it. Chairman, do you have something you'd like to add to that?
Thank you, Mayor Van Gausig. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for being here.
Mayor Alinsky, Vice Mayor, and council members. The mayor of Clarkdale has explained it better than I could have because he's been involved in the project for this is the second time. But I can tell you that we feel the same way about this project as has been explained to you. Anything that has to do with water coming down the Verde is important to us, and it should be important to anyone else who's on the Verde, in that it's going to affect us in many, many ways, and one of the main ones, as he mentioned, was economic development. And as we plan our budgets and make our planning for the Verde Valley and any growth that we want and anything that we want to see in the future and leave for our children, It's an important issue. It's something that we need to pay attention to. So we support their actions, and as he mentioned, we've intervened. And so we'll keep an eye out on what's going on, and we just hope by us coming this evening that you'll pay attention to it also, and that if anything more serious should develop, that at least Cottonwood will have this on their radar, and they'll be able to make any decisions that might affect the citizens of Cottonwood. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I just one question. Do you know what made the project fall apart last time, 5 years ago?
I think it was mostly line sighting and right-of-way things. Actually, I think it was probably money, and the money's directly related to all those kinds of very expensive things that they were doing. They never really got to the point where this one has, so it fell apart before it even got here.
Okay.
One of the important things, too, that I wanted to mention to you about the project is their application to FERC is not the kind of an application that assures us of any kind of environmental protection or any kind of mitigation for whatever amount of water they're going to be using up there. In fact, the application only says they'll assess how much damage it does. It doesn't say anything about how they're going to fix it. But FERC's really not the audience for that, so that should come through other kinds of channels, we hope. But we'll continue to make that point to them as it proceeds.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting us know, and we'll keep it on our radar.
Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
Questions from everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you, though.
Appreciate your time. Thanks. Okay, up next is a call to the public. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council regarding an item that is not listed on the agenda for discussion. However, the council cannot engage in discussion regarding any item that is not officially listed on the agenda for discussion and/or action. So is there anyone in the audience tonight that wishes to address the council about an item that's not on the agenda? Okay. All right, then we'll close the floor and move on to the approval of minutes of the regular meetings of November 7, 2017 and December 5, 2017. I'll go ahead and move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we had Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Allen seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. We go on then to unfinished business, just one item. We have ordinance number 636 relating to the transaction privilege tax, removing model option number 15, selecting local options number AA and number HH and number JJ, adopting the use tax amendments to the tax code of the City of Cottonwood by reference, establishing the effective date, providing for severability, and providing penalties for violations. This is the second and final reading. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Rudy Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy City Manager for the City of Cottonwood. I'm trying to get this presentation up. While that comes up, we're looking at the second and final reading of ordinance number 636, use tax. What this basically does upon adoption of the ordinance number 636, it adds Article 600 through 660 to the model tax code and actually removes our option 15 off of our model city tax code. This is a similar presentation. It has the same date that we had our first reading. Not much has changed from that. What the use tax basically does, it goes ahead and collects any type of monies that has not been paid in other locations. We'll go through the presentation and answer any questions. This is defined as use taxes imposed on the purchaser, not necessarily the retailer or the seller of the item. It's on tangible personal property within the city that's brought within the city limits. And there are multiple cities that already have a use tax. As you can see, 51 versus 41 cities have a current use tax, and that is 55% of the cities that we currently have, incorporated cities, mind you, not necessarily other communities that are not incorporated. The difference, again, as I mentioned earlier, the big difference is that one, our transaction privilege tax, our TPT, or commonly called sales tax, is imposed on the retailer or the seller of the items. The use tax is quite the opposite. It is based on the purchaser of the items. Area communities that already have a use tax are up there. Sedona collects 3%, Camp Verde 3.65, Prescott 2, Prescott Valley 2.83, Chino, Dewey, and Humboldt, and Flagstaff also collect, as it is noted up on the screen. There's some misconceptions about the use tax. The use tax will affect all local taxpayers. Obviously, it will not. First and foremost, it does not affect anyone that has purchased something under the $1,000 threshold, and we're not basically if you are paying your taxes on items that you purchase here locally, obviously you won't be liable for any additional taxes. There's not a doubling of the TPT. 3% is what we collect, and 3% is on the use tax. They're two totally separate items. They're used together to calculate the variance, but not necessarily is it stacked on top. So the 3% remains 3%. It's not an additional tax. Some groups are posting use tax from other states and other communities, and that's not exactly factual. Our model city tax code is structured so that each individual city can go ahead and craft their use tax or any tax laws to fit their needs. Not necessarily is it one standard template that fits all communities. So not necessarily because someone posts something up there from another community or another state is that what is going to be used for the city of Cottonwood. It's another tax and spend scheme. Well, unfortunately, the city of Cottonwood, as most cities, have fees that they collect, and they have taxes that they collect. The big difference from that comment is that the city of Cottonwood operates very efficiently, and it actually operates on a 3% sales tax to do all of their operations. It doesn't carry a property tax like most cities in the Verde Valley and beyond. And of course, it's already been approved. Obviously, it hasn't been. That's why we're holding the second reading. And today is the decision whether to go ahead and approve it, possibly sideline it for future discussions, or go ahead and modify it, at which point we would come back with anything else council would like to modify it to. Here's a few examples of the effects of the use tax. A vehicle is purchased from an out-of-state dealership and no local taxes were paid in that state where it was purchased. The owner lives and registers the vehicle in Cottonwood. The owner is subject to an Arizona use tax already in place of 5.6 and a Cottonwood use tax if it is adopted. This is the more big ticket type items. A new chain restaurant opens up in Cottonwood. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment is purchased in another state and delivered to Cottonwood for the new restaurant or any business. And the purchaser does not pay a local sales tax, then they are responsible for both Arizona's use tax and Cottonwood use tax. Another one is someone purchases a vehicle outside the corporate limits and they pay a lower sales tax, then motor vehicle, when registered here, will probably pick that up and you will get a bill for the difference between what was paid and the 3% that the city of Cottonwood would be asking for as a use tax. If you pay more than 3% in another community, obviously you won't be responsible for any. And of course, any arm's length transactions are not subject to this particular tax. Understanding that what we're trying to do is we're trying to help the local community, trying to support the local community to try to prevent leakage from going out of the corporate limits. There's 3 exemptions being considered tonight. Local option, AA, exempts the use tax liability of cost of employee meals provided by the restaurant where they work at. Secondly, of course, it exempts 501c3s. And third is the double J which exempts the city from having to pay the liability, because obviously we paid a 3% and we get back our 3% 2 months later. It doesn't make sense to be paying it up front and then having to wait for it to be returned to us. The benefits, of course, there's no additional cost to the city or the citizens. There's minimal burden to the local citizens, and it levels the playing field for local businesses with big ticket items. Also helps reduce leakage and helps collect on large ticket items purchased over the internet. Traditionally, many of those are without any tax involved. And today is, of course, our second and final hearing on this matter, and I'll go ahead and entertain any questions.
Council, do we have any questions for Rudy tonight? I know this is the second reading. We had a good discussion about it at the last, thank you, the last meeting. Are there any members of the public here tonight who have any questions about this use tax? No. I think what came up during our last discussion was kind of the idea of taking this in the context of other ways to generate revenue. And so I don't want to speak again for the rest of the council, but I'm more in favor to table this item tonight. And we know later on in our agenda we're going to be discussing our revenue streams and other ways that we can raise revenues, cut expenditures. So I'd like to kind of take this item in the context of that.
I would second your motion if you're making a motion to table it. I agree with you, and I think $75,000, we've got to look at what are we going to do, bigger picture than, in my opinion, than $75,000 potential revenue.
I have just two questions. I don't know how that affects, do we have to go back out for another 2 meetings when we table this item, or can we table it and then take a look at it again?
We would have to go through the process all over again. And mind you, that's not a big problem, because we're going to be talking about several different revenue sources in the future, probably in the next 30 to 45 days. And any option we take in changes in fees or tax structure requires us to have public hearings. So if this is something we would consider later, we would probably bundle it with all the other options that we have and bring it right back. We have everything in place.
I appreciate it, because I had the same concern. I know I was hoping last week when we had our work session that we were going to be able to discuss the revenue, so I was surprised when we didn't. And so I appreciate you bringing us that option so that we can continue to look at everything rather than just a single item at a time.
Okay. Yeah, and again, to be clear, I'm not opposed to a use tax. I think it does make sense for our community, but I do want to take it in the larger scheme and not piecemeal these options before us. So, is that any other comments from council on this? Okay, then I would move to table this item.
I'll second.
Okay, so Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Althouse seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Okay, moving right along, we have the consent agenda up next. The following items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. So I'll go ahead and read. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. I'll read them out for the council and public. We have resolution number 2930, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for funding for asbestos abatement at the Cottonwood Civic Center. We have resolution number 2931, approving an environmental access agreement with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, ADEQ, for the installation of up to 5 groundwater monitoring wells and other groundwater monitoring activities. Item 3, acceptance of a perpetual easement for the maintenance of a public sidewalk from Brent and Linda Backus. And item 4 is person location transfer liquor license application submitted by Andrea D. Lukovitz, agent for Wild Crafted Tap House located at 1017 North Main Street. Any items a council member would like to have pulled?
Item 1, please.
Item 1, okay. And any other items? Okay. Any items that a member of the public would like to have pulled? Okay, so then I would entertain a motion to approve items 2, 3, and 4 on the consent agenda.
I move to approve items number 2, 3, and 4 on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Henry made the motion and Piper seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll have the deputy clerk please read resolution number 2931.
Resolution number 2931, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Arizona, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, ADEQ, for the installation and maintenance of groundwater monitoring wells and other environmental testing activities in city right-of-way. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll pull item number 1, which is resolution number 2930, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for funding for asbestos abatement at the Cottonwood Civic Center. Good evening.
Good evening. Darren Nejad, Community Development Manager. As you know, Civic Center is under renovation and construction is going on. And during the construction, this item came up on the roof area. Asbestos was found. This was not part of the original grant. And after talking to ADQ, they understand the problem and they extended for $5,500 more to take care of this situation.
Thank you. May I have just a few questions?
Sure, of course.
For Baron. What is the total estimated cost for this extra work?
This is going to be just for this area, $5,500.
Has asbestos been identified in any other areas of the roof?
This was the last portion and it was taken out. There were some asbestos removal from the window areas before, but this is the remaining, and this was not foreseen that time. This came as a surprise when they got into area. They found out, and that's why this is coming in the last minute.
So do we anticipate that this grant will cover all of the remaining asbestos remediation work?
Yes, this
Okay.
was looked at by other company, and they gave us their bid, and this will cover this work for sure.
Okay, I just am concerned about the cost, the total
Yes.
cost for this project. They seem to be spiraling, and I want to make sure that this is the end of at least the asbestos remediation.
Hopefully for asbestos, this is it. For $5,500, this will take care of that newly came up problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then are there any other questions from council? Okay. Then I would move to approve resolution number 2930.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion and Councilmember Pfeiffer seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Deputy Clerk, please read resolution number 2930.
Resolution number 2930, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Arizona, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, ADEQ, for funding for asbestos abatement at the Cottonwood Civic Center. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. Okay, up next is new business. We have 4 items under new business. The first item is ordinance number 637, providing for a limited conditional exemption to the city's adopted international fire code requirement for automatic fire sprinkler systems for certain facilities seeking to operate as temporary emergency homeless shelters during the winter months, setting forth specific requirements, conditions, and limitations on such exemptions, and declaring an emergency. So the reason this issue came up tonight, and it's laid out well in the packet, but just for the benefit of the public, and as the council's aware, we had a one-person, one-night project, which was initiated by a few members of our community. The city council funded that for 2 years, but unfortunately the project's no longer in existence. So with the reformation of the Homeless Coalition, the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition, the president of that coalition now has really been working very hard to find other alternatives. And this is one such alternative that's come up, and I think it's a very viable alternative myself. And she's met with city staff and come up with what I think is a very reasonable solution to ensuring that we can shelter those most vulnerable during the freezing winter months, only when the temperature drops below 35 degrees. So it came up quickly, and I really want to thank our attorney, Steve Horton, for getting all this together, and all the staff that worked so hard to get this thing together really quickly, very quickly. And the reason why we have it as an emergency on here is because of the requirement for first and second reading, which would, if everything went smooth, and it, again, it lays this out in the packet, but for the benefit of the public, we wouldn't be able to get this thing approved until, I think, March sometime.
Mr. Mayor, it would be approved in February, but then if it's approved in the regular order, it's not effective for 30 days, until 30 days after adoption. So the emergency, which requires the affirmative vote, the approval of the mayor, the affirmative vote of 3/4 of the council, doing that math, that's, and you never want lawyers to do math, but that's 6 of you. It's 5 and a fraction, so it's 6 of you. But having it passed as an emergency also makes it immediately effective and not subject to that 30-day wait period.
Okay. And I'm sure council has a lot of questions. We have fire chief, police chief, other staff members here to answer any questions. But essentially what we're looking at doing is waiving that requirement, which we've adopted through the fire code, that buildings that change use such as this would need to be sprinklered. From my perspective, again, just speaking for myself, I think the spirit of that code is that we protect the health and safety of those occupants. I don't think that we're veering from the spirit of that code, in that there's also a very real danger to folks who sleep outdoors when the temperature is below 35 degrees through exposure and other winter-related occurrences. So I think that we're still meeting the spirit of the code, and as you can see through the packet and all the information in here, there's going to be a fire watch set up. There will be training provided to those who are in the shelter in the cold weather drop-in center. So in any possible way, we're trying to mitigate the possibility of a fire breaking out in this facility. But again, I guess I would offer any staff member to give their perspective on this issue. Do you have a question?
I have one question. I think that it's an excellent idea. My one question for our city attorney is, what comes the personal responsibility if in fact there was a fire at a facility like that, and we as council members have approved the use of that facility? What is the personal responsibility that we can feel?
If I understand your question, you are acting, anytime you're sitting up here, you're acting in your official capacity. So the acts you take are in your official capacity as local legislators. There is, and it would be inappropriate for me to speculate as to any possible application or context, but there is, in Title 12, there's something called absolute legislative immunity for acts you take in your official capacity to make local legislation. It would be likely that any claim for liability against the city and the council would be subject to the affirmative defense of legislative immunity.
Thank you.
And I think maybe another way to ask that question is, what is the worst case scenario here if a fire were to break out, the 2 trained people were asleep, what kind of risk would the city face under those circumstances?
I think, just to elaborate on it more, there was a fire, and God forbid somebody dies, can the family then come to the city or us as city council members for approving it?
So I'm sorry we're leapfrogging, obviously, the human, the speculative human tragedy and sort of looking back at, well, what if the worst case scenario happens? I think our fire folks might be well situated to speak to that. It has happened. But it's a legislative policy judgment for this council to weigh the costs and benefits of providing this carve-out, this exception, and it's very narrow. We did that in consultation with one another, with the mayor, with the folks from Yes, the ARC and the Homeless Coalition. It's a narrow exception, but is it without risk? I think, as everybody knows, no.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the fire chief or the marshal would want to speak to that.
Mm-hmm. please.
I would like to hear from the fire chief or the fire marshal on their perspective on this.
Okay. Sure, yeah, and they'll have an opportunity to speak. Councilmember Henry, did you have a
I just had a
question?
quick question I would love to hear from our chief and our fire marshal, but and I forget the exact name of our insurer now, if it's Ashton Tiffany or if it's still the Municipal Risk Retention Trust.
The risk pool.
Have they approved this project? Will we still be insured if we grant this waiver? Or are we taking on that liability and that risk solely on our own?
I am presuming that if a claim came in, that there would be, we would tender the claim to the carrier, and the carrier would take out the coverage document and look to see if a defense is owed. I suspect that the claim, the likely claim, and again, we're living in a world of worst-case scenarios here, would be of the kind for which a defense would be owed. And again, I think that defense would most likely take the form, at least first, of a claim of legislative immunity.
Thank you.
So I think, again, from my perspective, we speak about the risk and what could happen, and that we would feel liable if something terrible happened and a fire were to break out and we lost a life. I think that risk, we've done everything we can here with this proposed ordinance to minimize that risk to basically what I think is no risk at all. But, I personally feel liable when we do lose lives due to exposure. And we haven't done everything we can to provide opportunities for folks to remove themselves from those freezing temperatures, which puts their life at immediate risk. So, me personally, I feel very responsible for the loss of those lives.
I just don't think it would take that much time to get a written opinion from our insurance carrier about if you take an affirmative action and you waive certain safety requirements, certain requirements that are put in place for good reason, then we will still tender a defense and or indemnify, whatever our policy would cover.
I see your point.
But I don't mean to keep you waiting, Chief.
I can't speak to that because that would obviously be something handled by our city attorney or by risk management or that to do that. We have not approached, of course, our insurer. As far as the fire department and our stance on this, when we originally were contacted by Raina Avalon from the Homeless Coalition and asked the question, we had to say, based upon our current ordinance, you cannot put people sleeping in the structure. Having since then, we've met with her, and we know that there's a lot of emotion on this. Certainly, from the fire department standpoint, our job is to go out and to help people. That's what we do. Whether we've had instances, fires happen, but instances happen of people freezing to death. It's a no-win situation, and to some extent, the realities of it is because council did adopt the International Fire Code and as such some amendments to the fire code that apply to Cottonwood, which is the sprinkler ordinance, which requires sprinklers in a building that would be utilized, change of use, to make it residential, which this would be because they'd be sleeping there, that to do so, it would be in violation of the ordinance. Consequently, as the fire marshal and I are sworn, just like police officers are, to uphold laws, Constitution, state of Arizona, and for the city of Cottonwood. We cannot and did not feel that we could make a administrative decision to waive the requirement because this was passed as an ordinance by the city council. Consequently, that's why we're here tonight to do this. We certainly understand and sympathize with the problem of people sleeping out when it's cold. Certainly our preference would be for them to be in a building with sprinklers. Unfortunately, that's not particularly an option right now. We have even discussed that and had a wonderful meeting with Raina and also with Melanie Soto from Yes the Ark. They would love to put sprinklers in this building, and that's something else we're looking at, an option to try to, we can't particularly help them, we can give them some guidance into the idea of them trying to raise funds to put sprinklers in because their normal occupant use of the structure would be better served by having sprinklers in in their building as well because of their clients and the things that they do. So that would be the utopia, and we still look forward to being that in the future. With that in mind, knowing that that's not an option immediately, and this chance that we have with the cold weather coming up, certainly we understand that if the exception, if the council wants to make an exception to the code, that, you know, we uphold the code. If you make an exception to the code for this, then we'll uphold that. We came up with some what we feel are reasonable requirements to provide the maximum amount of safety that could be provided short of having a automatic sprinkler system in that building, which does include a fire watch and fairly strict rules for the person who is on fire watch that they have to be awake at all times. It has to be somebody responsible citizen, and you read it in your packet, all of the things that went with that. And so with those, we feel that provides the best level that we can provide short of the sprinkler system. And that's where we are on this. We put all this together. We took from some information from Seattle that Stephen provided to us. Took from that, the code itself, how to conduct fire watch. I'm sure the fire marshal would like to chime in on this too.
Yeah, so it did come at us really fast, and first of all, I'd like to commend the Homeless Coalition for doing this. I think it's a great thing. It does need to happen somewhere, somehow, but just don't eliminate safety for safety. Liability is definitely an issue, but the biggest concern is human life safety. Safety is number one. It always is in our job. So we have to come to a good common ground that makes sense for everyone. Let's get these folks off the street. Let's do what we got to do, but let's make sure that we're within the parameters of the code. The code's written in blood because bad things happen over many centuries, and so we want to maintain our life safety throughout the community for everybody. So we're willing to work with the coalition further. We're waiting for your guidance, and we're going to do what's best for everyone.
The meeting that you had was productive.
Absolutely. We had very productive.
We think it was.
We think so. I think it was productive. They understand where we're coming from. Mm-hmm. Again, we aren't here just to say no. What we're here to say was, we have an ordinance. We have to adhere to it. Just like any other law, the police officer can't decide, I'm not going to enforce that law. Sure. And we have the same thing. Whereas the people who make the laws, i.e. in this case, this ordinance, you as a legislative body have the ability to waive it. And I believe we've done this in a very limited, and that's where we feel that where I'm the most comfortable is, this is a very limited basis. This doesn't open up a door for everybody to just waive sprinkler ordinance when they don't want to do that. Sure. For the safety of the people. But in these very narrow parameters, written in a way that's not just for this use at this building, but within a narrow parameter that we do this when it's purely for a limited use emergency shelter, when the temperatures are below 35, when it's cold and people are going to die from that, one risk outweighs the other. So we'll put it it's kind of in your hands to waive that. Mm-hmm. We'll work with them. If you decide to waive it, we'll work with them to make it as safe as possible. And that's where we are on it. Do I have any questions from any of you?
Last thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, and just one thing. So maybe if you do decide to go this other route, maybe there is a way to still sprinkler this building. Yes, the ARC is open to it. There might be some funding resources available. We can't go out and seek those funds, but other people can. There's a lot of big players on that coalition. I know Spectrum's part of it. Mm-hmm. If you recall, 2 years ago, we gave them our commercial Fire and Life Safety Award because they partnered with us in training. Mm-hmm. So, I think this can happen in a very positive way, but don't extinguish or exhaust those avenues. Let's find a way to make this happen.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any other questions for the chief?
I have, and maybe not for the chief, maybe it's for the homeless coalition, but, or maybe it's for the chief, I don't know. How, it says that 2 people need to be awake at all times. Are there any checks on that those people are actually awake?
In the requirements we had, our requirements were 1 person awake for every 10 people. Now, the coalition has decided they're going to have 2 people on at all times. So, and we're only allowing a maximum of 20. So if they have more than 10, they'd have to have 2 to meet our requirements. They're talking about that, so I'll let her address that. Certainly, we would expect that from our standpoint, there needs to be some checks and balances. Hence, I can see having 2 to make sure that the other doesn't fall asleep.
Yeah, I mean,
but
in the middle of the night, it's very easy to fall asleep.
You know, that's within the realm of the requirements that we've set forth. I will have to leave that to Raina to explain how perhaps they specifically want how to provide that. So I would leave that to her to answer that question.
Okay.
And it's also in your requirement that they notify dispatch, so
They have to notify
police department,
dispatch
fire department would know when they're operating
when
that.
it's occupied, so that the police and fire, when they're responding, the dispatch can let them know that the emergency shelter is in operation at that time, which also helps us because we know that the building is occupied at night, which it normally isn't, which is, you can understand the fire service. Yeah, they're gonna have to maintain a log even, that's part of it, if the fire watch is maintaining a log, so they're supposed to write down when they check it. We'll be doing that probably in every half hour, they need to write down that they check the whole building and do that. It's not that real big of a building that we're talking about here, but again, these rules are written to be used if there's another building, another place, and do that. They're not just limited to this one time, one place. It goes into effect. It still meets those requirements.
And to give an idea to council on the amount of nights that this would be utilized, this cold weather drop-in center, I believe there's a 2016-17, and don't quote me on this, but I think it was 70 nights that the temperature dropped below 35 degrees at Tuesday, which is lower than the airport, which is where I believe they normally register the temperature for the day. So this isn't meant to be a homeless shelter for the entire year, just for that duration of winter when that temperature drops below. And it really is written specific for this building, even though I think it could be applied to other buildings, but this is a very specific, very narrow case that it's before us tonight.
It's a narrow case in all the restrictions, but it isn't just to this building. If there's another building, but again, each case would be on some of them case by case where our feelings are. We went out and looked at the building. There's exiting. There's a lot of other things that meet up with the current building that they're considering. Those would also be considerations, and that's also required in our requirements that the exiting meets building and fire codes and the things that it would have to have.
Right. And I know this.
Do this in, let's say, in a mobile home or something.
Right.
That somebody just picked to do this because it wouldn't meet those other requirements.
And I know this has come before your desk before in the past, maybe once or twice, and I don't think that we've ever had an opportunity where we have so many partners and such what I think is a great location for it.
This is, we did face this a couple years ago, had the same problem, but it dropped pretty quickly based upon, other kind of things. But with all the cooperation, again, we think it's a wonderful program. We know we need to get these people up and off of the street. We also need to do so with providing for the best fire safety and life safety balance that we can come up with for this.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As the council may know, our own Rudy Rodriguez is the president of the Risk Pool Board, so he has quite a few contacts, and he's made a contact. And to council members Henry's question, we would be covered, although we need to, like the plan lays out, we need to make a real solid effort in terms of making sure that it's absolutely as safe as possible. But this is a situation they've run into before, and they say we are covered.
Okay, thank you for that.
And they put that in writing. Are we also able to ask for indemnification from the building owner as an additional layer? I would think that any agreement, if we're waiving this, their insurance company should defend and indemnify. And I hate to speak, this is a great program, and I agree. I don't want, homeless and the lack of a homeless shelter here is something that, I try to promote, raise awareness, and support programs for our local homeless demographic. But I also don't want to put the city of Cottonwood taxpayers at risk by putting them at risk for something that could easily be corrected through, again, I think a defense and indemnification from building owner, and written agreement from our insurance company that we're not accepting ourselves out of coverage.
I'm sure we could get them to put it in writing, and I'll turn to Steve for the indemnification question.
And yes, can that be a requirement? You are legislating, so that certainly falls within your discretion. I think the carrier would probably defer to the coverage document, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think just like lawyers, I think you're going to get hedged answers from insurers until the claim actually comes in, because when you see a letter that you get back from an insurance carrier after you tender a claim or lawsuit to them, they will recite what the claim is, and then they will analyze the claim in light of the coverage contract, and they'll let you know whether there's any exceptions or exclusions, and so it'll really depend on what happens and what the claim is in terms of a definitive answer, but it's good to know that the first response from the pool is that, yeah, there would be coverage for a claim that arose out of a legislative decision like this.
And I hate to speak, I don't think it's reaching or speculating. I think as a community, we've all read the news about what happened outside of Flagstaff just over at the end of the year. That's something that you don't, that's such a wild reach to anticipate that a family of 4 will pass in a carbon monoxide poisoning right here in our own backyard. So when we sit and say, well, you know, risks, and it seems so speculative and so far off, it's not. And I'm sorry if that, you know, if daily work and daily, you know, my job as an attorney comes in when we're talking about risk, but it's something that I am concerned about.
Just so you know, we did put in the requirements, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detection.
Thank you. I did say
are
that.
required in there, and certainly after the thing in Flagstaff, that is on all of our minds, because that affects silent and can affect even those who are watching it, so that's something.
And this is more for the homeless coalition and people watching us on television. We shouldn't end here. We need to be sure, because of the clientele that attend that building every single day, their special needs, and we really, I would really appreciate if you'd get on it so that we can, maybe with the help of the television, get people to back you to get it sprinkled sooner than later. And I know some of the people that go there to school, and they panic easily. So if we could work harder, more diligently, somehow to get that thing sprinkled, I think that's a perfect answer. And maybe someone will come up with some magic money or fairy dust or something to get it done.
And that's an excellent point. How much are we talking? I mean, 10, 20, 30,000, or I'm not, do you have an estimate for the sprinklers?
Rick's open, yeah, we have to be careful when we get involved.
Yeah, so we've dealt with this kind of thing before in other buildings, but not in this case. So I have, you know, I did 5 home inspections this afternoon. I was talking last week a little bit, and today to some of the sprinkler contractors, a couple different ones. I made it very clear I wasn't speaking for anybody or anything, but I was just asking them what generally they would charge for a retrofit on a building. And I got a number for the very low, extreme low was $2 a square foot. The high was like $3.25 a square foot. So I don't know the actual square footage of that building, roughly, Chief, maybe 1,400 square, something like that, 1,400 square feet or something. But you know, can't be quoted on those prices. You know, we encourage Yes the Art to reach out to get 3 bids, and you know, anyway, we could help, you know, to look at that, but we can't be part of that, you know, that bidding process. You made a great point, and we were going to bring up too, the clientele that's in there daily would benefit greatly from safety from fire sprinklers. Yeah, if that was opening today, they would have to sprinkle it out.
There are different types of sprinkler systems, and what we're speaking about is allowing what's called 13R system, and I won't get into all the technical, which is not as extensive as a commercial, regular commercial in this. We also have to do a little bit of research to make sure that that's fully acceptable at that price. If it has to be a full 13 system, it will be more expensive than that. But we think that probably,
yeah,
I don't know, we haven't done all the research.
Yeah, so we're waiting for more answers, and then we're going to do more research hopefully this week. We'll reach out, and minus the Yes the Arc or the Homeless Coalition, we want to sprinkler everything.
Sure.
Yeah. So, if we sprinkler this building that we're in, that would be great. So, we know the benefit. Everybody sees the big fires in town when they burn down. Nobody ever sees all the saves we've had because
sometimes they can firebomb the finance office.
Yeah, so there you go.
I've got a
we have an amazing sprinkler ordinance in the state. My peers in the fire marshals groups across the state are amazed at what we do here. So I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but it's truly a great ordinance.
Yeah, on our sprinkler ordinance also, and that's why we're so big on it, it also has really figured in on us getting that ISO 2 that we have, and also just our fire loss, because not everybody uses the ISO, but they do look at fire loss within our community. We've had a number of saves in commercial and residential structures, which helps keep our fire loss numbers low, which is very positive for your insurance and those rates. So it's got a financial aspect to keeping and having a sprinkler ordinance too.
Right.
Fire safety, but also there's a financial benefit to businesses and residents.
And I have a special friend in my neighborhood that comes down and visits with me now and then, and any little thing like his lawnmower not working or his sister being taken to the hospital, he panics. So he goes there to Yes the Ark. So I have first-hand experience as to how they do fly off really easily, and they get scared, and they could. So I really hope that we can get that thing sprinkled as soon as possible.
We would love to see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there's no other questions then for the chief, I'd like to call up Raina Avalon to make a presentation to council. Raina is the chair of the Homeless Coalition.
Okay.
And
You want her down?
yes, are you done? Do you have anything else to say?
I have nothing else to say.
We'll probably call you back up, so don't go far. Good evening.
Hello, Mayor.
If you could pull that mic down so we speak directly into it,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you for being here.
Okay. I'd like to show you a schematic of the room, of the building. If we could get that up.
Raina, while we're waiting on that, I have a question. How many homeless do we estimate we have here in Cottonwood?
Well, in in the Verde Valley, there's estimated to be 169. So many of them are in this area.
But we don't know how many are just in Cottonwood?
Exactly do you know, Jackie?
I think I have a better estimate. Hi.
Hello.
Good evening, Mayor
Good evening.
and Council. I'm Jackie Nairn, President of the Board of the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition. But as you all know, I think, I've been working at Catholic Charities for the last 3 years and have kind of been in the forefront of this whole thing. The last point in time numbers that I have for Cottonwood itself only had 30. And then we had 23 in Sedona and a few others in the other communities. But the first year of the One Person, One Night initiative that Catholic Charities managed, we served 75 unduplicated homeless individuals through that program. And so the numbers here in Cottonwood are anywhere from 30 to 100, I think. But to have an exact number, we don't have. But we are conducting a new point in time count next week, so in a few months we'll have new current numbers.
And in this ordinance, if it's approved, is it, it's hard to nail down where a homeless person is living, but is it focused on Cottonwood? I mean, or?
Well, I don't think that we're going to ask them exactly where they're living or sleeping most of the time when they come to our doors for this program, but it's going to be centered here in Cottonwood, and so they'll have to be present in Cottonwood in order to come in out of the cold.
Thank you, Jackie.
Maybe a little perspective on how many people were serviced with the One Person, One Night project might help too, because that didn't have a real big impact.
Well, the first year, we serviced 75 different homeless individuals throughout the season. That would be from October through March.
But per freezing night, how many were sheltered?
Well, so, that varied quite a bit. So I don't really have those numbers per night. But a best guess would have been anywhere from 10 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be between Angie's shelter and the people we put in the hotel rooms.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Raina. Thanks.
Okay, this is a layout of the room. It's really one large room, and it has, we're not using the room at the bottom called the office. Well, that door will be locked, so we won't be using that exit. But there are 3 exits in this room. And there are 2 fire extinguishers and 5 smoke detectors, and there are carbon monoxide detectors. And I wanted you to see that the risk is low if we have 2 people awake all night and 3 exits readily available, you know, we hope that that will be safe. And the fire department has graciously offered to provide fire extinguisher training for our volunteers. Spectrum Healthcare, their mobile crisis unit, is available, you know, throughout the night. They have a 15 to 20 minute response time. And Spectrum Healthcare, again, has agreed to provide a mental health training for our volunteers because many of the homeless are mentally ill. So, what we're calling a cold weather drop-in center, you know, it's not really a show. It's when the nights fall below 35, we want to offer them a place to get out of the cold. And I understand that an exception was made last July for the camping ordinance to allow for the Thunder Rally to camp in Cottonwood. And, you know, it just makes sense to have a provision for the homeless to get out of the cold and to shelter them as well. The fire chief, they made a very wonderful effort. It's 3 pages long, their recommendations, and they're all things that we've already, our board has already decided upon. So there's nothing in there that poses a problem to us. So we really want to offer them a safe place, you know, and the risk, if you look at this building, the risk of there being a fire breaking out in the midst of this building and somebody dying is a lot less than them freezing on the streets. And yes, the ARC has liability insurance, and they're requiring that we have liability insurance, naming them as an additional insured. So we've really tried to cover our bases here. Let's see. The police department has offered to provide extra patrols. And, you know, basically we have laws that dogs cannot be out in the freezing cold. But yet somehow our homeless can. And we've tried our very best to make this as safe as possible and to confront all the contingencies. And that's our plan, to offer safety and compassion to our homeless members of our community. They're our community members.
Any questions for Raina from council?
No, thank you, Renee.
I just had a clarification because I wasn't sure. First, thank you for your presentation, and this diagram is very helpful to see the layout, the location of the detectors, the exits, etc. But you did touch on the liability insurance, and you said somebody had to be named as an additional insured. I wasn't clear.
Oh, yes, the ARC.
Okay.
We will have liability insurance ourselves, and we will be naming yes, the ARC as an additional insured.
And do you know if there's a way that if the rest of council agreed, which I don't know, but do you know if there's a way to have the city also named as an additional insured?
I don't know. I can certainly look into that.
Well, I'm just one person. I can't speak from my fellow council members.
I think it's an excellent idea, Tosca.
I really like the project. I do think that, you know, this has been a terrific project and a lot of time and energy put in by a lot of people, and I appreciate that. I don't want the project just to go nowhere. I'd like to support it, but if that's something that we can verify fairly easily, that might dissolve my concerns. So.
Okay. I'll definitely get in touch with them tomorrow.
Well, I mean, it depends also on consensus tonight.
My question would be, is it possible to move to adopt the ordinance contingent upon the receipt of indemnification from?
Always dangerous to legislate on the fly. This was in the packet. This is how it was posted. Could you do that? I think that could be in the words of the motion. You could adopt it, and then if you don't have that insurance or some satisfactory information about the indemnification come the next meeting, you can always repeal that which you pass. You could wait until the next meeting. I guess those are the options I can think of.
I'm very happy with Chief Kirkendall's assessment and everything that he's done on it, and that gives me a great amount of comfort when it comes to approving that. I understand, let's talk about the edge of a knife, because we represent both sides of this coin, where we're trying to protect the people of Cottonwood and we're trying to protect the homeless, which are people of Cottonwood. So we be both sides of the coin. I'm very comfortable with it. I just would like to satisfy Tosca's concern as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question too for Mr. Horton. This is pretty open-ended, the ordinance. Could we limit 1 year? You know, because I don't want to just approve it and the sprinklers never get done.
Again,
So-
you have the power to repeal anything you legislate.
Meaning that if the sprinklers don't get installed and it's something that's critical to council, then next year we could take a look at it and say.
Yeah, but we got to remember to take a look at it, and we got to remember to follow up on whether or not sprinklers were put in, and we all know how you know, stuff like that happens. I just hate, you know, I think, you know, what Karen said is important is we do need to, this building does need to have sprinklers, and I hate to just approve something open-ended and they never get sprinklers put in.
We have the fire department to fall back on that. They'll be looking at that, I'm sure.
And I think we've put in, again, speaking for myself, we put in so many other measurements to ensure the safety of the occupants in that building overnight that sprinklers for me aren't as much a concern as getting folks in a place where they won't be exposed to the elements. And just circling back to the conversation earlier about being listed as additional insured on the liability coverage that the Homeless Coalition would have for this use here, I think if our risk pool covers us for the legislative action that we take, I feel like, and I also don't want this thing to just not happen because we're trying to over-insure ourselves to the nth degree where it just may not be reasonable or feasible. And I don't know, because I'm not a insurance person. I don't know how that works, frankly. And I don't know their level of concern with listing. I mean, how many additional insured can you have? I mean, are they, you know, we don't know these things.
No.
But I feel like we're covered. Our other bases are covered so thoroughly that I don't know that it's, for me, again, speaking for myself, it's not as strong an issue.
And I think as the mayor and staff know, I mean, they would have heard the hue and cry from me if there were any real red flags. And I'm not in the business of outwitting a plaintiff's attorney who, I don't know who it is, I don't know what the facts are, I don't know what the claim would be, but there is a very robust absolute immunity for the legislative actions you take from the dais here. I believe it is more likely than not, it's way more likely than not, than any claim, again, leapfrogging the human tragedy that we will have to have endured in order to get to the place we're talking about. But if we get to that place, I believe the relevant law and the relevant consideration here will be the absolute immunity under, for the record, 12.8.2001.
Okay. Anything else?
Not for me.
Okay. Well, don't go far because we'll probably have more questions.
Questions?
Any more questions from council at this time? Okay. If there are any members of the audience tonight that would like to address the council on this item, there's some yellow forms in the back, and you're more than welcome to fill out those forms.
I need to step in for just a second.
Sure.
To speaking to the COIs, it is not uncommon that whenever we partner with someone for TVR, for example, Amanda, as our risk manager, demands that we have COI coverage. So this is not uncommon. The ask for certificate of insurance is not an uncommon thing to ask for, and insurances readily go ahead and provide them. Now, traditionally, AMRP doesn't have a fee to add people. They can add as many as we need to. Some insurers do have a fee. Usually it's a fairly nominal fee, but the big thing is to make sure that those COIs are to the limits that the city requires, because we have some fairly high limits, because when we get sued, they come after us with a vengeance. But we can get involved and ensure that COIs are put in place and make sure that we make it as smooth as possible.
And COI is Certificate of Insurance, and AMRP is Arizona Municipal Risk Pool, is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So we can get involved in that and get all the COIs we need to make sure that we have the coverage that we request.
If I could jump in again, I apologize.
Please, no, go ahead.
So the way we wrote this, and I know this is a discussion the fire folks and I had, and I think Doug and Rudy may have been part of that discussion too, is we talked about this indemnification. I don't know that it made it into those requirements, restrictions, limitations, but what we did write in there is what you would be legislating is some administrative discretion by the fire marshal and fire chief. So if in connection with passing this, you were to give direction that that's a requirement, that's an expectation of a requirement that you have, I think that would then allow them to make that a requirement as they approve a particular facility under this exception.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Clarifying that means we don't need to include it in our move to adopt. It's just
I think
an
if that's the
assumption because we
direction,
direct it.
if you're getting some nods from the folks in white shirts in the back.
Okay.
And are you referring to Section C, enforcement? The fire chief may, in his sole and sound discretion, alter, modify, or decline to alter or modify the conditions, requirements, and standards?
Yes.
Hey, I have one more question.
Yes.
This ordinance doesn't seem to be limited to this particular building, and yes, the ARC.
Right.
Am I correct?
It is not. There is always a problem with what we call special legislation. You're not supposed to legislate for classes of one. So you can legislate narrowly, and that was the intent here.
So if another facility wanted to do the same and they didn't have sprinklers, they
would be subject to the same limitations and restrictions and the same review and approval conditions from the fire department. But yes.
It was written as narrowly as possible to apply to this particular case, but we can't name Yes the Ark in this ordinance because that would be illegal. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But you're right.
It concerns me because we're passing something that then, any other facility, and we have a lot of really old buildings
right
here in Cottonwood,
right.
Could open up emergency shelters.
They could. I don't to assuage your concerns, I mean, I don't think there are people tripping over themselves right now to open up and the same players here tonight are the ones that have been working on One Person One Night and have been working on this since 1990 something. I mean, it's a concerted effort by a lot of people to make this happen. So I don't think that if this gets approved tonight that tomorrow we're going to be barraged with a bunch of folks trying to open up shelters.
Right,
I doubt
I
it.
agree with you. I just,
But to your point, yeah, you're right. It could apply to another building. But at the discretion of the chief and marshal, they would say yay or nay to any other proposed projects like this. Not to drag you up here again, but
because of the appendix or the Appendix A, which was our rules and regulations, and again, as you just stated, we have the ability to change those. That's why we talked about the fire watch and all those things.
Mhm.
It did say in there were some things there about exiting and other requirements, and that the design had to comply with the building codes and those things too. I would like to think that would preclude us from buildings. As I said before, and as I didn't talk with Raina about this, was, if you were coming to me trying to put this in a mobile home,
right,
that wouldn't meet the exiting, wouldn't meet the other things that we need to do. So we would have some latitude in that. I understand with Mr. Horton that we can't restrict it just to this building, because if, let's just say even this building, something happens and the Homeless Coalition can't use this, they find another building that's suitable and do that. I can understand having some latitude in that. Certainly we'll always be wanting to go back and looking at sprinkler buildings as our first choice to do that, and would still like to sprinkle this building and do that, but it allows us some latitude to do that. And then it's the same, could be the same thing, that if somebody felt that our requirements were too strict, that they might come back to the council at another time and ask for exceptions to the rules and regulations that we have and that were put in place by this ordinance. But that would be, at that time, our intention is to always look out for first fire safety and life safety of those there. I hope I've answered
thank you.
Your concerns.
yes, thank you.
And if you'd like to require in those, we can even amend these, I believe, Mr. Horton, is that correct? After the council, if they would accept this tonight, the current appendix, that we could make a change even in that.
We wrote
immediately
yes.
regarding the
yes.
Making the city an additional insured.
We wrote it that way deliberately because we knew enough to know we weren't going to be able to predict all of the concerns that came up tonight, or all the things that anything we might have missed, or any circumstance that might change, and we didn't want to rob the true experts in fire and life safety from the discretion to make modifications without coming back to you either at the next regular meeting or to ask you to meet on Thursday.
Right. Okay. So, again, if you would like to address the council tonight, you can fill out a yellow form. That should be in the back on a table there, and I'll call you up. And Raina Avalon, you did fill one out. Did you still want to address the council, or do you feel like you're? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the next up is Audrey Dorfman. And before you start, you are limited to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for
Great.
being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. So I am a member of the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition, but I'm here tonight representing Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, who is in favor of the exception. And several years ago, Sheriff Masher established a mental health, criminal justice, and community coalition. And basically, it's to enhance public safety with mental health, criminal justice, and all of these issues that we're looking at. Part of our partnership includes Cottonwood PD, who has really stepped up, and and all law enforcement and other agencies. What we want you to also understand is there have been times when law enforcement has had to respond to a call. It's a homeless person, and they were then sometimes charged with a misdemeanor, camping in city limits, and brought to our jail, maybe make bond, maybe can't make bond, but that's costing the county a lot of money when we are housing someone for homelessness. And we as a coalition and at the Sheriff's Department are really making great advances in decriminalizing homelessness and mental health. And our jail right now is more, filled to capacity, overfilled. You heard Captain Noonan at your last meeting speak about that. So we are in favor. We know as a community we have to have coordinated efforts. We have to be willing to think outside of the box. And yes, safety always comes first. We are grateful that you're considering it and taking it really seriously, and we are in support of it.
Thank you for being here tonight. Up next is Vicky Jo Anderson. Good evening.
Council members, I am new to the coalition, but I'm also president of the board of Yes, the ARC. And when I came on with the coalition and found that they had talked to churches, they had gone through numerous buildings, and there was no possible agreement or it would work. I went back to Yes, the ARC, and I sat down with Melanie and Penny and presented that to them, and they were gracious. Penny was a little cautious. She's been in business a long time. Melanie was saying, it's been on my heart, and I think we could do it. So this building, if you know the campus of Yes, the ARC, they're all old buildings except one. That's the cafeteria. And this is the new one that is the cinder block. And it's the newest building there. And so they are graciously opening that door, and they're taking quite a risk doing that. And their requirement, or our requirement, is that there be 2 trained people there at all times, all night. Now we know that that's required by the fire chief as well. The other thing is, to your, Ms. Pfeiffer, we have set that we want the time will be like 5 o'clock. All of our clients will be gone, and they'll need to be gone like 7 in the morning, those that stay the night. So I just wanted to give a little background information to that so that our clients will not be impacted by them, but it'll get them out of the worst of the cold.
Thank you. Okay, we have, is it Maury?
It's Mari.
Mari, sorry, Mari Rhodes.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council. My name is Mari Rhodes, and I am a 4th generation member of my family to be raised in the Verde Valley. And for a living, I work with the demographic of individuals that we've been speaking about this evening. One of my main concerns is that I've noticed is that we're using a lot of projection in our planning and what we're speaking about in terms of what if this happens and what if that happens, and if we do this, then what will the cause be or the effect. When I'm speaking with my clients, I usually encourage them to consider the information that we have at hand and to work to build a plan with the information that we have. For a very long time, as you all know, we've been working to try to have more options for the members of our community. And a lot of these members do pay taxes. A lot of these members are veterans and have paid their debts to society as, felons. But regardless of who they are, they do deserve to be safe. And I think that it's part of our responsibility to ensure that that happens for them. My father is on the fire board, so of course with that comes a lot of the decisions that they've been speaking about today. And I do think that the education that we are able to provide to the individuals that volunteer here, even the individuals that stay at the facility, would be quite helpful. You know, eventually the people that have stayed there might become volunteers themselves. I do think that it opens a wide range of opportunities for a lot of individuals. So I'm hoping that you'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the council tonight? No. Okay. Council, do we have any other questions for staff? No. Okay. I just want to say that number one, no matter how this goes tonight, I really do appreciate the very focused effort from Cottonwood staff on this. It was dropped on your plate relatively recently. Though it's been circling around for a long time, but really took great focused effort on everyone's part, and I do appreciate you working so hard to get this before council. And my intention is not to dissect or dismantle the fire code. I think, like the marshal and the chief both said, safety's number one, and it still is paramount in my mind. So I don't mean to dismantle that ordinance. It's important that it be in place, and I think Cottonwood is really progressive in our fire code, and I know it helps the community at large. But this is one of those instances where, in the spirit of that same fire code, protecting health and safety, I'm all for this proposed ordinance. Any other discussion from council? Then I'll propose that we approve ordinance number 637.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion and Councilmember Allen seconded it. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, you need to take a roll vote. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Deputy Clerk.
Councilmember Althouse,
Yes.
Councilmember Norman,
Yes.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Councilmember Allen,
Yes.
Councilmember Henry,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hauerge,
Yes.
and Mayor Linsky.
Yes. So the motion passes. Deputy Clerk, please read ordinance number 637.
Ordinance number 637, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, YAVAPAI County, Arizona, approving for a limited conditional exemption to the requirement that certain structures be equipped with fire sprinkler systems to the extent such structures are used to provide temporary emergency shelter services to homeless persons on nights where the forecast or actual temperature falls below 35 degrees Fahrenheit, setting forth the conditions, requirements, and operational standards for the application of that exception, authorizing the fire department to administer and enforce those conditions, requirements, and operational standards, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I was remiss in not thanking all the members of the community that came together to work on this proposal, and who've worked on many proposals in the past, and gathered all the other stakeholders and gathered all the other nonprofits in the community to really come up with a solution to helping those out who are most vulnerable. So thank you to you all. All right, we'll move on then to second item under new business is overview of the city's budget process and revenue streams review. Hello.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I'm Kirsten Lennon, Accounting and Budget Manager. Tonight we're just going to go over the budget process and our major revenue streams, and a little bit on some ideas to increase revenues and some cost-cutting measures. So the budget is an ongoing process. It never ends for finance. It usually starts November, December timeframe. We send out tons of information to the departments to get goals and accomplishments, performance measures for the next year, and get them going. Then you guys meet and do a strategic plan, which they can use to put together their accomplishments and goals and try to match their performance indicators to make sure that they're meeting what you lay forth in the strategic plan. Then in February, we distribute expense reports that show the last 2 years, what they've spent in their department, the current year, halfway, and what a projection is for the end of the year. And they're asked to look at their budget and put in the current year's ending figures and next year's request. Then we have meetings upon meetings upon meetings where we discuss those numbers and we try to get, a realistic idea of what that base budget is going to be. And then we meet with the city manager to discuss and the mayor to discuss new employees, capital requests, any reclassifications, any changes that they'd like to see in their department, any new programs they'd like to see. And then about April, after we've been doing this for a few months,
we bring you a proposed budget that is usually a balanced budget, which means that, you know, revenues equal expenses. And then in June, typically, we've had a couple meetings with you, we've discussed the budget, we adopt the budget. July, August, we have, get the budget ready for GFOA, sorry. And that's where we get our budget presentation award from. So there's a lot of stuff that has to go on behind the scenes for that. That usually goes out in September, and then we start again in October. So really it's an ongoing cycle. This is the beginning of the tentative budget calendar. We've added a lot to the budget calendar this year. We are going to be coming to work sessions and presenting to you. The departments will present their goals and accomplishments and their performance indicators and any needs or issues that they see in their department. We also, on February 13th, will be coming back to you to talk about revenue and increases and cost-cutting measures, things that we can do to help the budget for the next year. This is the ending of the budget calendar. And like I said, we are going to be at pretty much every work session from now until April, I think. And the departments will be presenting to you their goals and accomplishments. So the budget document is a 300-page document. It's rather large. It's kind of, you know, detailed in the beginning on what is going on, and that's the executive summary. And that kind of talks about the current revenues, what's happening, talks about our plan, what we plan on doing for the year, and then there's some strategic planning for a 5-year capital plan and operations. And then the next section is major revenue, all the revenues, which I'm going to show you in a minute anyway. And then the rest in between is every fund has its own section, and each department within that fund has a section. And then there's a supplementary information, which is just appendix and a map, glossary, and those types of things. Capital. So each fund has a revenue and expense breakdown in the very beginning, and each fund has this page that shows which funds are included in that. So you have the general fund, special revenues fund, you have the enterprise funds, and then fiduciary, debt service, and capital improvement. And they show which departments are within that fund. And they each have a consolidated revenue and expense sheet. So at the beginning of that special revenue fund, there's a consolidation of all the different departments that make up that fund. And then when you get into the departmental, they each have an explanation with goals and accomplishments and the description of what the department is and the purpose, and it also has an org chart for that department, who's in that department, and some major budget highlights if they're planning on purchasing some large equipment, it will be in that section. Thank you. And then you get more detailed where you can see personnel, you can see the total revenues, where the revenue are coming from for that department. You can see a listing of all expenditures in each line item and what those expenses are for each department. And so it's all consolidated into one big document. And if you have any questions on that, I will take that before I move on to our major revenue sources.
No questions from me. This is just very helpful. I appreciate you breaking it down like this.
Yeah, we were just trying to give you a layout of how that is done in the budget document, make it a little easier for you to read. And we plan on putting this in the actual budget document as well, so that when people go to look, they can see what it is.
Good.
Good. Okay. We have our major revenue sources. Our local transaction privilege tax, which most people call sales tax. State shared income tax, state shared transaction privilege tax, vehicle license tax, investment income, building permits, fines and forfeitures, franchise fees, highway user revenue fund fees, local transportation assistant fund, wastewater revenues, and water revenues. You've seen these graphs, they're in the budget. It just kind of shows you how our sales tax has been. This is the 2017 is the first year that we are close to the same sales tax numbers as we were in 2007 before the downturn. Obviously 2006 and 2007 were our highest taxable sales, but we had a lower tax rate at that time. We went to the 3% in 2010. So that's where you see the little increase in tax revenue there. State shared income tax. This is a state projected number. They tell us in usually April or late April, early March, what they anticipate for the year. And you can see that it's been, the last few years has been pretty steady, but during the downturn it was lower and not increasing at all. Same thing with state shared transaction privilege tax. The estimates are just estimates. We don't have our CAFR done yet for this year, so I can't give you 2017 numbers. We have the vehicle license tax. That is also, we get that from those numbers from the state as well. And it's been pretty consistent the last few years. And then we have an investment income. And we had higher investments back in 2009-10, and then we did a lot of construction. We built a recreation center, we built a communication center, we built some stuff, so our investment income is not as high because we don't have as high of investments. Plus, with the downturn, those rates really dropped on how much you get back for your interest income. Building permits, again, those were really low in 2007, 2008, kind of went up a little bit in 2009, dropped down, and they're kind of remaining steady. The last few years, they've kind of grown a little bit, but it's not been a huge increase. Fines and forfeitures, those are court fines and fees. They've remained pretty stable over the last few years. There was a new fee put into place in, I think it was 2010, the court enhancement fee, so that kind of spiked it up a little bit. Franchise fees, this is the franchise tax on APS, Citizens Gas, and then all the cable companies, and they pay those quarterly. And it spiked in 2012 because we increased APS.
And are we in line with other communities on those franchise fees, taxes?
When they come up, we do look around, and when it comes time for renewal, we try to make sure that we are.
Okay. So with APS now we are current?
And there's a provision, and I didn't coin this phrase, that we try to get into our franchise agreements called most favored nation status. And what it says is if the franchisee is going to pay any other jurisdiction a higher franchise fee, they match it. They match that with what they pay to us.
Is that in our APS agreement?
I believe we got that in there.
Okay. When are the others up for renewal of the franchise agreement? I mean, years out, because it's every 5 years or something, isn't it? Or longer?
20, I think.
Oh, 20? Ugh. It's too bad. Well, never mind.
That's why it's good to have the favored nation clause in there.
Okay.
Highway user revenue funds, those come from the state as well. Every year they threaten to take these.
And they do.
Yeah, and they do. They reduce them every year. They use them for DPS or some other services. Same thing with the local transaction assistance fund. LTAF funds, we haven't gotten it, obviously, since 2011. And I looked back, our peak was in 2012 when we got $54,000. And we always use these funds for the transit program. So even if we got them, ever decide to do it again, it will go to help the transit program.
And again, back on HERF, the governor's budget is proposing sweeping about $100 million of HERF funding to fund DPS. So we anticipate we won't get that money again this year.
I'd heard maybe LTAF is back on the table.
There's been some discussion about that. We haven't heard about the level of funding yet.
Obviously, these are wastewater user fees. You'll see that there was an increase in 2014 and then again in 2016. That was when the water rates were changed and the wastewater rates. Again, the same thing for the next slide with the water service user fees. But consumption is down, so that kind of, you know, affects this fee as well. So since consumption is down, we don't bring as much revenue in. But we are looking currently at those fees and to determine if rate needs to be increased.
And those, again, those two fees are enterprise, so they don't go into the general fund.
No, they do not help with the general fund. They are solely enterprise fund revenues. So we have a fund balance policy. We currently have our general fund balance policy at 16.66% of the general fund normal expenses. It does not include grants or anything that's out, you know, an outlier that's not part of the normal everyday. 25% would be preferable, and our general fund capital plan was capped at $1 million, and that is funded. And then HERF, the 5% to 16.66% is not funded. Library, 0 to 5% is funded. The enterprise funds are partially, and then of course the debt service covenants, we have to follow those, so those are funded.
Can you explain the general fund fund balance policy, please, in a little more detail? What, not less than 16.66% of what?
Of an annual normal expenditure. So we take the full expense for the general fund minus any grants or any outlying amounts and take 16.66% of that, and that is funded. So I think last year it was close to $3 million.
$3 million that you just keep in the general fund.
That's, yeah, that it's a fund balance policy, and it's put into the council's budget as an expenditure line.
And that's predominantly for emergencies. It gives us at least 60 days of operating funds to continue the operation of the city if something traumatic were to happen.
So that's our...
It's a reserve.
Our reserve for that instance, okay. And it's 60 or 90? 60?
60.
60 days, okay.
So this is a slide of 10-year historical fund balances. Obviously in 2008 we had a large fund balance, but we have done a lot of construction and some good improvements in the city, you know, the library, the recreation center, the communications center. We've done some street projects. And you can see it's broken out between general capital projects, highway user revenue fund, debt service, and non-major grant. And the yellow is the capital projects fund, and that's because we used a lot of that capital projects fund balance to do those big items, the communication center, streets projects. What else do we do?
The rec center.
The rec center.
So the non-major governmental fund, that's, where does that money come from?
Those are like grant funds and the smaller funds, airport grants and other grants.
They seem insignificant in the scheme here. I thought that was quite a bit of money that we brought in for grants, especially around the airport, isn't it?
But this is fund balance, so we don't have a lot of fund balance in those grant funds, which is, you know, kind of like your amount that's on your books as your savings, but it's capital assets and all their items that are sort of liquid.
Okay.
But we do have a lot of grant funding that we get for those grants. It's just not included in fund balance because we usually expend it as soon as, you know, we get the grant and then we do the project.
Okay, that makes sense.
A lot of the grants are reimbursable grants, so we spend the money and then we get it back.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's usually how that goes.
That makes sense. Thanks.
You can see that, you know, our resources compared to revenues compared to costs and ending fund balance. You can kind of see where, you know, we used the resources we had, the spike in the fund balance, and then it went back down because we used those resources on projects. And then some of that money has been used also on the water reclamation facility. So that's why it drops there at the end. Sales tax. Like I said, this 2017 is the first year that we have taxable sales close to before the downturn economy, And in late 2009, early 2010 is when the rate went from 2.2 to 3%. And so that's why it's going up. Same thing with total taxable sales. You can see on this chart where it shows total taxable sales for 2007 were 447 million, and then in 2017 we're at 485 million. So that's the first time we've come close to those numbers from 2007.
And 7 was really the peak of the insanity too, right? So
2008 is when everything dropped down.
Yeah.
So. This is actual revenues versus expenditures and budget. So you can see that gray line is the budget. And then the blue line is revenues and the orange line is expenditures. And in the years where the expenditures are higher than the revenues, those are years that we use fund balance and reserves to pay for projects or pay for expenses. And then that on the other side where the imbalance dropped in the same type of pattern. But the budget is obviously usually quite a bit higher than our actual expenditures, since we do budget for any possible revenue or expense that we plan on getting. Any grant funding, anything, we gotta make sure that we have the budget authority to be able to spend that money.
is it fair to say we prefer to see the blue line on top of the orange line more often than not?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very fair to say that. So we just sat down and brainstormed, and we're going to give you some revenue possibilities. You know, there's always transaction privilege tax and increasing that percentage. Our taxable sales were $485 million in 2017, so our sales tax collections was $14 million, and that's with the current rate. So we wanted to give you what it would be if we increased it by 1%, 0.65%, 0.5%, 0.25%, and also show you what our neighboring communities are doing. And Sedona just went to their council and upping their sales tax to 3.5%. Starting March 1st, it will be at 3.5%. So just kind of shows you we're pretty much in line with what everyone else in the neighborhood is doing. Some other ideas, Rudy's use tax that he was talking about earlier. He's given you that whole definition and explanation. We have other sales tax options, the bed, board, and booze tax. Obviously, we already have a bed tax. It would just be a tax on the food and alcohol.
So we don't currently tax food and alcohol?
Not
Just bed.
from,
Yes, we do.
yeah, there'd be just an increase in those.
Break it down for me if you could.
Well, it'd be an increase in bed, board, and booze tax from the 3% that we're currently at now.
So those are all taxed as one item, bed, board.
May I ask a question?
Please, of course.
Have you done any projections for any of these other options, like if we were to tax?
We have done some small projections, but we plan on coming back to you in February at that first work session with some good, numbers of these projections on these revenue increases, possible revenue measures that could happen, and also cost-cutting measures that we will list in a minute.
No, do you have current estimates on what we get from bedboard and booze? Is that broken down?
I don't have it on me, but I could definitely send it to you so you know what it is. And the bed tax, we pay all the bed tax to the chamber and to the CEDC.
85% goes to the chamber.
And 15%
goes to the CEDC.
CEDC.
And that gets us, what, 300,000 a year, roughly?
Yeah, roughly. We also talked about reviewing all the fees that we currently have in place. And I did get some approximate numbers, like from planning and zoning. They have a few fees, and they said that their fee increases that they had thought of proposing would bring in approximately $350,000. Public Works talked about updating their right-of-way permits and their grading permits, and they said were thinking like, they would take it up 150%, because currently I think it's $40 for a right-of-way permit. And they couldn't give me numbers before this presentation, so I will get those before we come to you on the 13th. Thank you. And then the airport talked about upgrading and upping their tie-down fees. And that Morgan estimated it at probably around $28,000. So it's not a lot of money. This isn't going to make a huge difference in the budget of these fees, but it is an additional revenue. We could develop new fees, stormwater fees, fees for developers, new airport landing fees, trucking fee for operating on city streets, do charges for repeated inspections, those types of things. We could also do a property tax, although that's a lengthy process, and by the time you would get that enacted, we wouldn't actually see any revenue from that until like 2020. So that obviously does not help the current situation.
On the new fees, do we have any information on other communities, surrounding communities that do have such fees implemented, like a trucking fee, for example? Are there any other communities that have a fee like that we could compare to?
I'm sure that there are other communities, and like I said, we'll come back with some good numbers from other communities when we talk at the revenue and cost-cutting discussion. We'll have some good, solid community numbers and what we think would be a good fee to enact for that as well.
Okay.
Obviously, we're always open to suggestions from council on ways they think that we could increase our revenue stream. Because there is obviously, we've had these discussions. It's when that orange line is higher than that blue line, you have a problem. So we really do need to be talking about making sure that those lines are at least flat.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with a couple cost-cutting ideas, and these are definitely, there are no numbers involved with this, really. This is just some ideas for you to think about between now and when we talk about possible revenue and cost-cutting options. We talked about reducing building and park maintenance services, closing the softball facility. That takes a lot of time and maintenance to keep it up. Eliminate city-sponsored events. There's a lot of events that we put on that we pay for. Now, you have to eliminate the revenue too, so sometimes it's not really a cost savings.
How many events does the city produce?
At least, I would say at least 10. At least. TVR, I mean, walking on Main, we got
Easter egg hunt.
Easter egg hunt.
4th of July.
4th of July. Marathon.
Farmers market.
Farmers market.
Biggest ones being Walking on Main, 4th of July, Thunder Valley Riot. What is it fair that those are our 3 biggest ticket?
But we do also get a lot of revenue for those 3 things too. Even the Mickelson Marathon is an expense, but we get revenue for that as well. So you have to eliminate both. So if you eliminate the cost, you got to eliminate the revenue.
Is Mickelson a big ticket item? I don't know off the top of my head.
It was, I think last year was 23,000.
Budgeted, and then we received some money for the registration and everything.
I thought we received 7,000, which when you look at the limited expense and that amount that we made, I mean, it seems like it's a small little moneymaker, and I'd be more interested in looking at cuts toward programs that perhaps didn't have such a good return.
Right. Yeah, because like I said, if you eliminate the expense, you're also eliminating that revenue that's coming in to offset that expense.
And the 4th of July, that's a $35,000 or $40,000 one, right? There's no return on that necessarily. There's community return. I'm not saying there's not a return.
Definitely the community. It is it's a wonderful event, and everybody loves it. But there is no return on that.
But there could still be an opportunity to bring in partnerships.
Yes. There's always that opportunity.
And not insignificant partnerships. I mean, how much some sponsorships we receive for TVR Walking on Main are upwards of $5,000 plus, right?
10. Yeah. 10, 15.
Yeah. Okay.
Some of the other ideas would be to privatize the rec center, although that would be hard on the citizens. You know, our cost of our rec center is fairly nice for them, and it's a nice amenity to have in our town, but it would be a cost savings. Privatize the water departments, the water companies, into different sections. Instead of it being Cottonwood, all one, we could take the Verde Village and Verde Santa Fe and make them their own, since it's not Cottonwood.
Now you make it seem like it's so simple.
It's not. It's not simple.
Just do it,
I'm
right?
just putting everything simply for this presentation. I'm sure when we come back with actual numbers, it will be a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
These were just some ideas that popped into our head when we were thinking cost cutting. What could we give you that would actually be a cost cutting measure that, it's tangible.
No, I don't mean they're good ideas. I don't mean to say that they're not. It's just like privatizing the water companies. I think is something very, very worth exploring. But wow, what a big complex process that would be.
That would be a very big process.
And again, we save annually on the debt service payment, and also recover our investment in those water systems to pay off the debt for the systems inside the city. Same with the recreation center. You lose that debt service payment every year, and you would recover some of your investment so you could pay off that debt as well.
Has there ever been, to anyone's knowledge, somebody approaching the city with a briefcase asking to buy the rec center?
Not yet.
Not yet. Darn. Keep my fingers crossed.
We talked about closing the indoor, the outdoor pool. It costs a lot to run the outdoor pool, and the only return on that is the high school uses it a lot, and there are some small fees. So again, you're going to lose that revenue, but you also remove that expense. Reduce pavement preservation and sidewalk budgets to pre-2018 amounts. We just put this in here because we need increased staff to be able to help those projects move forward as well. So it was just a thought.
That was what, $20,000 is what the amount by which we increased it?
25%, I think.
Yeah, it was 25%. It's a huge amount. And it was a large amount. It was, I want to say it was 220, 250?
One was 150,000 alone, and then the other one was 20, so it'd be 170,000 or so.
Yeah, and the general fund does fund a lot of the HERF and those street projects. So there's a lot of money that transfers from the general fund to HERF to cover those projects.
And that to me, just again, based off the community survey, seems like it's just kind of a non-start.
Yeah.
But it's something we need to figure out how to fund. I understand that.
So other things we thought were reduce hours and services at public facilities, library, rec center, youth center. You reduce the hours, close the facility for that time. You don't have to deal with utilities or staff. And then reduce outside agency support. We do support those items. Those are some things you could remove from the budget.
And the senior center, isn't the city don't we have a like the Humane Society, we have a responsibility? Do we have a responsibility to the senior center?
We don't technically have a responsibility to either one of those entities. It's the way we look at it, though, is if we didn't have those organizations, we would probably have to provide that service.
That's what I mean. Like,
yeah.
I think we're required. Like, I'm more familiar with Humane Society, but I think we're required to have some sort of animal humane society, right. And so we choose to fund right. the Humane Society. And I don't see the Humane Society listed here, but the senior center, I thought it was a similar. We're not required to have anything for our seniors.
Right.
Okay.
And probably because the Humane Society is not listed there because we do have a statutory obligation for animal control.
Right, right. No, I understood why the Humane Society wasn't listed. I was just surprised on the senior center.
Those ones that are there, to be clear, we're not statutorily required to provide.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So again, any suggestions from you, we will take, and we'll discuss those even more when we come back in February for our revenue and cost-cutting discussion. And if you have any direction that you want us to look into, any specific thing, please let us know. And I'm open to questions.
I have just two things I wanted to bring up under the cost-cutting opportunities. And I just want to have an uncomfortable conversation about the merit that the city funds and health benefits for the dependent coverage. Thank you. So if we could look at that, again, the average that's paid out for each employee for merit and our health benefit, and just to make sure that's kind of in line with, again, other communities and agencies, and something that we do need to look at.
We'll make sure that we have that as part of that discussion of those numbers for you, so that you can see what other communities are doing in those two areas and what a cost savings would be for us. And
then on the pool, the outdoor pool, we have an agreement in place, don't we, with Mingus Union High School or with the Clippers? Who do we have an agreement with?
Mingus Union High School.
And do they pay or offset the cost of heating that pool beyond the season that we normally close it?
Yeah, I think it's this year it was up to
8 or 9.
Yeah, 9,000. And the Clippers have given us money in the past too. I think they're still giving us $3,500 a year.
I think close to $4,000.
Yeah.
That doesn't touch it really, does
half,
it?
About half.
About half. What is that the agreement that we have in place? Is that they pay for about half? I forget because I know we discussed it.
There's not a formula in the agreement, but I think staff calculated when we first started doing this. Staff calculated what it would cost to provide the chemicals and heating and all the other costs we absorb when they're using the pool, and I think it was around half, and I think our costs have gone up, and the contribution, I think, has gone up incrementally too, but I think we're still around half.
And they have sole and exclusive use of that?
Well, and yeah, because the outdoor pool closes in August.
Okay.
And so then it's extended out till potentially the beginning of November.
Okay. the funding of the Chamber of Commerce too. If we get some information on what other communities do as far as funding their chambers, that would be helpful. And if you could find that person with the briefcase.
I'll go searching for that person.
The Veterans Wall, is that the Welcome Home Vietnam Vets? It's just listed as wall, but it's Welcome Home Vietnam Vets.
You'd have to go back to it, but
Yeah,
it may be the Welcome Home Vietnam
Yeah,
Vets.
I think it is, I think.
Yeah.
Because we don't bring the wall in
Every
every
year.
year. It was just
Right.
brought in, you know.
That's our portion. Every community
Every
that's
community,
involved
yeah.
pays their portion, and we just keep it there.
Right.
And on the outside agency support, I know that we require quarterly reports from them, but that's just a report. You know, do we require, are we benchmarking their performance in any way, shape, or form? When we give them money, is it tied to some kind of metric that shows that they're doing something productive on behalf of our community, which I know they are, but I mean, are we actually tracking that in some way that is justifiable?
Well, we don't have a current benchmark.
No, that's never been established. I mean, obviously what we do is, are they providing the service that they generally provide? You know, and if that's something that the council would like to look at, I mean, that would be a great discussion to have during the budget process and with the different, particularly the line item.
Something I've thought of,
agencies.
it's just a maybe a harebrained thought, is that when it comes to outside agency support, that we create, much like we did with the Building Community Grant program, we set aside a pool of money, and by my rough estimates, it's over 100 grand that we put aside for outside agency support. So for those agencies that want to apply for the money, they could apply for the money on a competitive basis, but they would have to be tied to some kind of a metric that they're enhancing quality of life in Cottonwood or whatever it may be, so that we can be assured that, one, it's competitive, so it's not just your line item year after year, but that you're also actively, you know, making things better in Cottonwood.
I agree with you. I think, you know, I think I had this conversation was, it seems like it's the same organizations year after year, and it's, you know, what are they doing? You know, I know what some of them are doing, but I don't know what all. And so I agree with you. I think it would be nice.
And I agree, except with the exception of the Senior Center and the Meals on Wheels program. And again, I'd welcome Elaine Brumner to come back and discuss. I think she's worried about facing additional federal funding cuts and some other, you know, resource streams. And so many of her population really just won't eat if that program doesn't continue.
Sure.
But I'm open to discuss. I do like the idea of, instead of the same organizations every single year, well, what is their plan for this fiscal year?
Right.
How are they going to spend the funds? And then, what is the benchmark or marks that they're reporting back to council on?
And I have a question also. Do we ever get any kind of audits from some of these individuals where we're given, or organizations where we're given the money and then we know where that money's going? Have we ever had an audit from the Senior Center? Have we ever?
We've gotten the Senior Center to send us an audit on my request. And they're audited by local firms. They're not really super detailed. All they do is check to make sure that revenues or expenditures, unlike our audits, that are a little bit more detailed.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think some of these organizations could probably benefit from, you know, a little shot in the arm, you know, once in a while, much like the Building Community Grants. So it's just a talking point, and it could be that we break it up. So if you're a veteran service organization, you would fall under this category. If you're a special event organization like the Birding Festival, or maybe even OTA, you could fall under this category. So we might even think about breaking it into different categories so that there's a dedicated revenue stream for whatever nonprofit you belong to, but it's still based off a competitive process.
And I think the council would also benefit from such a competition, because I know I didn't know for many years the Birding Festival is the event that brings in the most people into the city of Cottonwood.
Mm-hmm.
The Birding Festival, it is, and we only give them $2,000. I was amazed by that.
Yeah.
So it's an education for us as well.
And in that event in particular, I know that they could use extra funding to make it great. And Verde River Days as well. I mean, it's just, there are some events that do draw in a ton of people. And the birding sport, which I'm not really into, but apparently the rest of the world is, because it's like the fastest growing sport. Maybe pickleball.
Yeah.
Maybe pickleball.
Might be a good competition.
Yeah, right. Get them together somehow. Amazing. Okay.
This was good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So up next, item 3 is annual consideration of the appointment of vice mayor. So again, this is something I'd like to see come up every year. I think it's good to just check in with council and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to serve. So here we are. It's the first of the year, and it's time to talk about it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may first.
Sure, please.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mayor Linsky, for giving me the opportunity to serve our community as a vice mayor this past year. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd also like to make a motion, if I may.
Sure.
Can we have some discussion?
Yeah, can we have discussion?
We can make a motion and have discussion, or we can have discussion now, whichever.
Whatever you say, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to hear from everybody personally and see who's interested in vice mayor. I personally think it's a responsibility where the person needs to be available. Mayor Linsky, I've had a conversation with you about a community organization that kind of felt neglected, because the mayor or the vice mayor weren't able to go. And these are things that happen during the day for the most part. And so I think it's important that person be available to serve during the day as well, or at least have a flexible schedule where they can kind of come and go, because I think it's important that we're out to all of Cottonwood and representing all of Cottonwood.
And you're right, and I'm not able to make it to a lot of things, during the day, especially at, when there's late notice.
2 o'clock in the afternoon,
yeah,
at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Those are tough for me to make. And this is an important position. That being said, I really haven't leaned much on Vice Mayor Hodeggy. There was one time when I asked you, I think it was to attend or welcome folks to the Birding Festival, I think,
right.
When he was able to do that. And if I have to step down, of course, you step in to chair the meeting. But yeah, I think obviously the ceremonial aspects of vice mayor and mayor are important to the community. So if there could be somebody who could serve in that capacity, that would be great. And it's always nice if council members can also step in to fill that void.
Yeah, I think though there's a big difference in the community when you have the mayor or the vice mayor there versus a council member. And I know, we're all just, one of 7, but a lot of the community feel that, it's a different, I can't think of the word, position.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Any other discussion?
I'm not interested. Been there, done that.
You were the vice mayor for
10 years.
For 10 years, yeah. I just think it's, it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal, and I would like to see it change up. I would like to see it change up. I think it's nice that everybody has an opportunity to serve. So.
There's been numerous times we've asked Kyla to step up to represent the city where Michelle would represent the chamber. That way we'd have two people representing.
Absolutely.
Michelle, I'm sorry.
Michelle Masters.
Oh, Michelle Masters, I understand, yeah, okay. In the event, you know, I mentioned the word property tax too many times, and get clubbed to death outside the council chambers. The very important role of vice mayor is that they step in to serve in the event that.
I'm firearms proficient, you're good.
So, but really, in the untimely demise of me, it could happen that the vice mayor would need to step in. I feel like it's important that the community has had an opportunity to vet that position. I'm open to any suggestions here, folks.
Let me ask a question first. Tosca, if you got the nomination for vice mayor, would you accept that? You interested? No pressure.
Well, let me ask the same question, Kyla. Are you?
Well, let's have her answer.
Well, she's
first.
thinking.
Well, let her think.
Well, of course, I'm willing to serve, but you know, I'd also like to hear discussion from the rest of council as well.
So I think one of the things that made the previous councils function so well is something that you can't do is full-time mayor. You have a family, you have a job. So we had a full-time mayor and then a part-time vice mayor because they were employed elsewhere. I think you need the balance of someone that can go to meetings when you need them to go to meetings, and you need somebody that has that flexibility when your position doesn't allow you that. I think that needs to be considered when you're thinking about that vice mayor position. Can somebody pick up when I can't be there? That I think that should be taken into consideration.
I agree. So my question, Kyla, if you were nominated, would you accept the nomination?
How about you, Councilmember Allhouse?
My schedule's not as flexible, and so at this time, I'm not interested. I work full-time. I do work from home, but I do work full-time, and like today, I was on the phone all day. I barely got to a 5 o'clock meeting on time. So it's a little bit more difficult for me. Plus, my husband just retired, so I got to keep working. So are you ready for a motion?
I am ready for a motion.
I think I was poised for a motion before we got into the discussions.
Well, we haven't heard from Councilmember Norman either.
No, not me.
I'm not interested.
Short and sweet.
And so, Councilmember Althouse, your concern is if somebody has a full-time job, they're not available to attend meetings or be present for public functions. Is that correct?
My concern is that there's been a lot of events that the mayor and the vice mayor have not been able to attend because they're during the day, in the middle of the afternoon. And I'll just, Military Service Park is one where we have not had the mayor or the vice mayor, and we've had at least 4 unveilings. And they haven't been there. And the veterans feel like, and if it was written in the paper, I'm not, making this stuff up, it was in the newspaper, that they feel that they're not supported by Cottonwood City Council. And so I think, like Kyla said, we had a full-time mayor and, Karen working part-time, it worked out better because we had more community involvement. And I know having a full-time job that it's hard for me. I've had someone who wanted to meet with me for the last week, and I was finally able to do that today at 5 o'clock. So I know it's harder when you work full-time.
I'm glad you realized because, between the mayor and I, we are still working. So I'm glad you realize that.
And I understand your point.
Upon being invited, and which I have never been invited since I left the mayor's office. But if you want to go back to when I was mayor, I was at every function because they were inviting the mayor to come in there, and I was there with that. So.
But they don't invite that much anymore. They're expected to basically watch the calendar and the newspaper, and because I'm not invited to a lot of things, I just know that they're happening and I show up, and that's the way it was with Diane and I. And if she definitely got a hold of me, if she couldn't be there, I could be there.
A lot of it comes down to just that, is that I too haven't been invited. And I know that you, Councilmember House, let me know about the next unveiling, which I greatly appreciate, because now it's in my calendar way ahead of time where I can be there. Whereas, the ribbon cuttings, often I get notification a few days in advance, and that's near impossible to shift things around.
They're hard.
It's very difficult to know, everything that's going on. But I understand there's more weight when the vice mayor or the mayor's present.
People want to see one or the other.
Absolutely, I get that.
And I think, like Karen said, a lot of this stuff is advertised. It's in the newspaper. It's in, this thing that I gave you for the hospital, the Save the Day, they've asked me to provide all the council members' email addresses, and I just need to get that over to her, and you'll be getting an invite to that. But yeah.
Okay. Then I think we're all talked out here. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, just let me finish my motion and see what goes on here. Anyway, I would like to make a motion to appoint Tosca Henry as vice mayor.
I'll second. So vice mayor made the motion, mayor seconded. Deputy clerk, we better have you take roll call.
Councilmember Althouse?
No.
Councilmember Norman?
No.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
No.
Councilmember Allen?
No.
Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Howergy?
Yes.
And Mayor Linsky?
Yes. The motion fails. Do I hear another motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to appoint Kyla Allen to serve as the vice mayor of the city.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Allhouse made the motion and Piper seconded. Deputy clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Althouse?
Yes.
Councilmember Norman?
Yes.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Yes.
Councilmember Allen?
Yes.
Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Councilmember Vice Mayor Howergy?
No.
Mayor Linsky?
No. And if I could make my no vote clear, I appreciate the work that you do on behalf of Cottonwood, but the thing for me is that it's important, again, in the untimely demise of the mayor, that somebody who was elected be able to fill that seat. And that's really what it comes down to, is that it was an appointed position and the public didn't have an opportunity to vet you as council member.
And understand, if you recall, you were in an appointed position as well.
I was.
When you first started with the city. And I think I'm probably a little different than most people. You'll find out as a vice mayor, I will probably be one of the biggest cheerleaders you could have. When you can't make something, I'll be there. So understanding your negativeness, I would implore you to step back and give me a chance and watch what I can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the reason I voted the way I did, to be honest with you, is availability. And being in that position for 10 years, it just boiled down to availability. Anybody on this dais could very well fill your spot when you're not there.
Right.
It has nothing to do with Ms. Henry or Kyla's personality or anything like that. It was strictly availability.
And I understand. And it would be the same if it were Councilmember Norman. Yes. And when I was appointed, I felt the same way. That I was appointed. Getting elected is much different than being appointed, and I would not have felt comfortable stepping into that role. And I'm just speaking for myself again, because I was appointed. The public, the citizens of Cottonwood who cast their ballot, never had an opportunity to vet me as a candidate, and I was always very aware of that as an appointed member of this body. So it's important to me. I don't mean it to be disrespectful to Councilmember Allen in any way, shape, or form, or Councilmember Norman. It's just that that's why elections are critical. And I think that there's a lot of weight on allowing the voting electorate the opportunity to vet the candidates. That's what it comes down to. It's nothing personal. I know you're going to serve great in that capacity, but again, if I get clubbed to death, which is likely to occur after this meeting, you would have to step into the role. Turn feather, yeah, it might be.
And just so the public is clear, when we're discussing my availability, I'm not aware of any concerns that I've not been available for a public event or a public function when I've been asked to attend or be invited. So I just want to make sure there's not confusion. I'm not aware of any concerns, apparently, or perhaps my fellow council members have concerns about my availability, but that's never been voiced by any member of the public or any department that I'm aware of. So,
I think the concern, Tosca, was being an attorney and having to be in court at various times. Some of these situations do not happen way in advance. It's like last minute notice that Karen had to be there or Ruben had to be there. And if you're in court, you can't do it.
and thank you for that. Thanks.
All right, moving on to the last item here is annual appointment of council representatives to various organizations, committees, and boards related to intergovernmental, regional, and other matters. So again, this is something I want to come up annually to make sure that we're all having an opportunity to serve on the various boards and commissions that we're asked to serve on. So we can just kind of go down the list here. First up is NACOG. I'm the appointed one, and the alternate is Councilmember Allen. Does the council still feel like that's?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. And are you still fine in serving in that
Absolutely.
capacity? Okay. NAMWA, Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, Councilmember Pfeiffer is the alternate, or excuse me, is the appointed. The alternate is Councilmember Allen. Does that seem?
And I'm asking to step away from that. Did I get somebody else to put in that spot for Karen to support her?
Is there anybody who, have you had any issue with attending those?
No, a lot of them I have to do, like when they're in Payson and other places, I attend by phone.
Okay.
And when I don't, then Tom fills in for me when somebody else can't be there, because
Okay.
he knows that he's on the NAMWA TAC,
Mhm.
and it hasn't been a problem.
Okay. Is there anybody who would like to fill in as alternate on that?
And it does go around Northern Arizona, Flagstaff, Prescott Valley, Payson.
Mm-hmm.
It does take a day. It's on a Friday, every 3 months.
I will gladly be the alternate as long as I never have to fill in as the alternate. I'll be the alternate. If I can call in,
Yeah, you
I'll
can.
be all right. And what time of day is it?
It's in the morning at 10 on a
It's
Friday.
perfect. Works out just perfect.
You
All
take
right.
the rest of the day off.
So we'll put.
And when it's local, you're done in an hour and a half. But when it's Payson, got a little bit of a drive.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Usually in July in Payson.
Okay. Well, we'll add me then to the alternate. And are you okay just still being the appointed?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't let me down. All right. VVTPO, Verde Valley Transportation Planning Organization, we have Councilmember Norman as the appointed one and Councilmember Althouse as the alternate. Is that still a good arrangement?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. VV Rio, Verde Valley Regional Economic Organization, Councilmember Henry is the appointed one, and the alternate's Mayor Linsky. And we had meetings early on about that organization, and we're actually not invited to attend their monthly or bi-monthly meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I forget how often they meet, so I think we may as well just strike that from the list unless we hear otherwise from them.
Well, I still go to the quarterly,
Mhm.
or the 2 meetings a year that they have open to the public, and I find that that's useful. So whether or not it's on the list as my designated meeting, I still plan to attend those. They're very useful and valuable, so it really doesn't matter one way or the other, whether it's on the list.
Yeah, I think they're not asking for anyone to serve on their board, so I think we should strike it. And I think I was at the last VV Rio meeting, and they are very useful. So, but the public and everybody else is invited to attend those. Cottonwood Personnel Board, Councilmember Henry, you're the appointed one, and Councilmember Althouse is the alternate. Is that still a good arrangement? Okay. Verde Valley Homeless Coalition, Mayor Linsky's the appointed one, Councilmember Allen is the alternate. Does that
works fine.
Still work? Is there anybody else who would like to serve on that? You want to hog it? No? Okay. Would you like to be the appointed one and I'll be the alternate? You want to keep it the way it is?
Keep it the way it is because
Okay.
I've got the NACOG. I've got
Okay.
3 as well.
That's fine.
I'm hoping to have the NACOG.
Our Area Agency on Aging, Region 3, NACOG, Councilmember Allen. Again, you're the appointed and Althouse is the alternate. Does that work
Yes.
for everybody? Okay. And Alternative Pension Board. I'm the, by default, I think the appointed one on that. They meet once a year, conveniently right before Christmas. So is there anybody that would like to be an alternate for that? Because there was a glitch this year, called a glitch, and there wasn't an alternate appointed. So if we could appoint an alternate, I think that would help Rudy a lot.
I can, Norma? Good.
Okay, then we'll, Councilmember Norman, does that work for everybody? Do we need motions
When do
or
they-
just a general nodding of the heads?
Mayor, when do they meet?
They meet last couple weeks of December.
So I think we're having, well, we're having elections, and
Oh, good point.
it's my understanding
Oh,
Ms.
that's true.
Norman is not going to be running.
That's true.
So
I'm glad you're sharp.
I don't know how to say it,
Thank
but
you.
that's just what the rumor mill has out there, that she won't be running. So I don't know if it's a good idea to make her the alternate.
Thank you, reminding me. December now.
Were you did you say you would be? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's fine.
To your
Yes.
question, Mr. Mayor, some of these organizations are city, the council and members are participating on a voluntary basis. Others, we have these bodies that are based in code or established, and they perform official functions. So I would recommend that once the discussion's over, that there be at least a blanket motion and vote on these appointments. Some of them aren't necessary, but I think there may be some that are useful to have that.
So to be, just a little clarity on this alternative pension board, we're trying to kill this board, trying to dissolve it and get rid. I'm just saying it publicly now so that maybe that puts some wheels into motion where we can actually get rid of it, because I think it serves little purpose now.
A little less than that.
Little less than little purpose. So
Well, you're running from the club, just duck and let the club swing.
right. So okay, so then we'll have Councilmember Allen then. Okay. All right, as the alternate on that. So then I would move to appoint, I wish I'd made a better record of this. The only changes then would be that
Namwa.
NAMWA, that I would then be the alternate on NAMWA. And I would also move that that we appoint Councilmember Allen as the alternative for the alternate for the Alternative Pension Board. Were there any other changes? And to strike Vivi Rio from the list.
Second.
Okay, so Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Allen seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. And council, if there are any other boards or whatever that come up that you feel we should have some presence on, don't be shy to bring these up and we can try to get some council appointments. Next up is claims and adjustments.
Move we pay the claims and adjustments.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Allen made the motion. Norman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.